Ground rules for today. Please turn off all cell phones and computer devices that generate noise. Distribution of campaign paraphernalia is forbidden, even buttons. Please show respect for all present by not speaking when someone else is speaking or has the floor. Do not shout out loud from the floor. Any shareholders who had the benefit of questioning candidates on Thursday evening are asked to refrain from approaching the mic to ask another question until all newcomers are allowed to come forward. Thank you. Good afternoon, shareholders. Welcome to the 2014 Meet the Candidates session. I'm Barbara Williams Henry. I'd like to introduce and thank my Elections Committee members attending the session today. They are Susan St. John Parsons, who is the Vice Chair, Joyce Quinn, Marcia Duffy, Edith Acosta, Marina Gerbich, and Jonathan Memmert. And I'd like to say thank you to Donna Quiros, Secretary to the Board, Morningside's management staff, and also maintenance staff for their assistance in planning this event. Welcome all candidates for the Board of Directors and also the candidates for the Elections Committee, and especially for your participation in the Morningside community. Please note our candidates for the Elections Committee seated are, well, some of them standing. Edith Acosta, Margie Tishene, and Jenna Titus, who will not participate in the question and answer session today. Introducing the candidates for the Board of Directors: Detta All on the extreme right, James Campbell, Chi Chow-Wan, Michael Dimon, Toba Frankus, Madeline Kraft, Stuart Linder, Daniel Lowenstein, Maitri Singh, and Gabriel Suleiman. Each candidate for the Board of Directors will present for 3 minutes. Now, in reverse alphabetical order, starting with Gabriel Suleiman to our extreme left, Maitri Singh, Daniel Lowenstein, Stuart Linder, Madeline Kraft, Toba Frankus, Michael Dimon, Chi Chow-Wan, James Campbell, and Detta All. After all presentations are made, we will open the floor to shareholders' questions. 1 minute is allowed to ask your question. Candidates will have 2 minutes to answer. The time clock will be utilized for both shareholders and candidates. A sign will let you know when you have 30 seconds and then 10 seconds. When asking your question, please give your name, building number, and please specify whether your question is addressed to a particular candidate or to several candidates. Questions only, please, no statements. In order to provide all shareholders with equal access to the questions and answer session, questions will be asked by lottery. You may obtain a lottery ticket from any Elections Committee member. If your ticket is drawn and you do not wish to ask a question, you may not cede your question time to another collaborator. Once your question has been answered, another ticket will be drawn. Limited time prevents follow-up questions, so none will be allowed until everyone else who wishes to speak has had an opportunity. If all first-time questions are exhausted, shareholders have an advantage to ask additional questions. To begin making a statement, I'd like to invite Gabriel Suleiman.
Hello, everybody. Gabe Suleiman.
Madam Chair, can I make a recommendation? Given that that most of the people are kind of right here, and the mic is over there, I don't know if it makes sense to have this in a place where people can see it.
Is it better? Right here?
On the floor?
people can't see over here. That's the best vantage point.
There are some people here that can't see
The
it.
best vantage point is right there.
Oh, all right.
Is this good? Okay, great. Gabe Suleman, a little bit about myself. I moved into Morningside Gardens to a studio at the suggestion of my dad 11 years ago when I was 24 years old. I was the only one I knew who had committed my financial future so early, and few of my peers understood why. Now at 35, expecting my second child, MHHC is more than a home to me, but a place where I expect to raise 2 children. A lot has changed in the last decade. Community has become rarer and exists more and more online. However, when I return here to the gardens, I always feel in good company. There's a common sense of values, and interaction happens in the old sense, real time and in person. Last year I ran for the board and lost. It was a great experience. I met so many people that I never would have otherwise. This year I'm running for the board again. I feel it is necessary because I have experience to win. I have an MBA, served on the finance committee since 2011, and recently left the Guggenheim Museum as retail business analyst. I also want to run because I see changes to the community that require mediation. We have seen tremendous prosperity in the city around us, and many of us have prospered in our own resale values. But we also see a threat to those individuals that make up the fabric of our community through higher prices and maintenance. We are a unique specimen that I believe should be cared for and nurtured, but not made extinct through higher common costs. Another reason I wish to run is the need for mediation with how we interact with each other. Promoting civility is paramount to my interest in joining the board. Civility with our dialogue, civility with how we treat our employees, and civility with how we disagree. Here's a brief quote from a New York Times article from 1982 that inspired me and that I would like to share. This week, there have been celebrations to mark the anniversary of the development's opening. The residents have put on skits, shown home movies, conducted apartment tours, arranged dinners and planted commemorative trees on grounds that seem to be litter-free and that abound with honeysuckle, hydrogenas, and impatiens. It has that wonderful cosmopolitan quality of the city with the attitude of a small town. It is genuinely integrated, but integration is too thin a word to describe it. The integration is racial, ethnic, by age, sex, vocation, avocation. It is middle class in the best sense, unquote. Morningside Gardens is truly a unique and special place. We are at our best here when we come together, and at our worst when we don't. I hope to continue in the great tradition of cooperation that this community was founded on, and it would be an honor to have your support for the Board of Directors. Thank you.
Next up, Maitri Singh.
Good afternoon. First of all, thank you everyone for coming indoors on this beautiful, beautiful day. So thank you for giving up your time and coming to listen to us. My name is Maitri Singh. I've lived here at Morningside Gardens for about 12 years with my husband. And I've had the privilege of being on the board of directors since 2011. I hope that I have represented you well, and I'm asking again for your support for another 3 years. Most of us want the same things for Morningside Gardens. We want a thriving community, safe and welcoming for our children, seniors, and everyone in between. We want our buildings and infrastructure maintained wisely and efficiently, along with the right people in place to do so. We want attractive grounds, thoughtfully and consistently and cost efficiently maintained. And we also want to make sure that we have more than sufficient resources, both financial and otherwise, to continuously improve our collective investment. We may differ in how we go about achieving these fundamental goals. I commit to achieving these goals through fair, balanced, thoughtful, and independent analysis of the facts and how they impact people. My professional experience includes successfully managing large projects, staff, and budgets, while focusing on challenges and solutions. I commit to treating our staff, board members, and fellow cooperators respectfully. Let me share with you some of the qualities that I have relied on in the last 3 years while on the board. The first is to come to meetings ready to adapt and to keep an open mind. We have 11 members on the board because often as individuals we lack complete information, and it is only after discussion with the others that we come up with the best possible solution. The second is to have a thick skin and to be able to disagree respectfully. The third is to take a stand, to have an opinion and not to be afraid to say it, even if you know that it will be voted down. You have to trust that if you believe in something or someone strongly enough, you have to stand up for them. And often this means standing up for someone who's receiving unfair treatment. Fourth is to have a sense of humor, and also finally to make a contribution towards making this a better society and a community for us all. What we have here is precious. We cannot take it for granted, nor squander it away. I try to make such a contribution in my work and here in Morningside as well. What I'm referring to is the need to preserve an environment that is kind, fair, and honest. I have given you some of these examples in the literature that I have distributed, such as advocating for CRC, being a volunteer for MRHS events, and also helping to get composting off the ground. Being a board member has not been easy, and I understand that it is a grave responsibility. I ask that you entrust me with this responsibility for another 3 years. Thank you.
Next up, Daniel Lowenstein.
Hello, everybody. It's nice to talk to you on this beautiful day and nice, intimate focus group of undecided voters. I'm Dan Lowenstein, and I am running for re-election to the board. We've been here for 17 years. My wife and I moved in '97. Have raised 2 kids here. I have an MBA, and I'm currently in a senior position at a healthcare nonprofit that builds primary care facilities in underserved communities. That's what I do when I'm not doing this. I'm running for re-election and would be honored to have your support. And a little bit about what we've done in the last 3 years. In 2011, Morningside Gardens was in crisis. Our costs were out of control. We had 3 years of deficits totaling $3.5 million. We just had a 15% maintenance increase. Our brickwork project had been halted by the city. The bank wasn't approving our loan, and an unsuccessful campaign to remove 3 hardworking board members pit neighbor against neighbor. You elected me to the board elected me the president, and soon after we discovered serious financial improprieties in mismanagement, and the general manager resigned. Hurricane Irene damaged over 100 apartments, including ours. Our crumbling chimney needed to be replaced. But we took on these challenges. The bank approved a more reasonable loan that met our capital needs. We reduced expenses, brought in more revenue, and put ourselves on more sound financial footing. We got the brickwork project moving again, and we hired a professional management company. We also had some failures. The replacement chimney we were advised to construct has been plagued with problems and is at a downright eyesore. We took too long to repair the apartments damaged by Irene. Under new board leadership, we continue to make significant progress in some areas. Our management company has been put controls in place, negotiated better deals, and saved us money. We have had 3 straight years of surpluses. We compost now, and we can finally see daylight. In other areas, we have fallen short. The Duane Reade store remains vacant, costing us about $200,000 a year. Management has made some frustrating mistakes and needs to be more responsive to shareholders. We're not managing our employees so they feel valued. We are not treating many important groups in the gardens with the respect that they deserve. And we have not set a tone for civil discourse, either on the board or with shareholders. Now, no one is perfect, but I believe being an effective board member means learning from our successes and failures. And I hope that you hold me to that standard and all of the folks that you intend to consider for this election. We may not agree on every issue, but I assure you that I will approach my duties thoughtfully. I will hold management and the board accountable, and I will safeguard your interests as shareholders and as residents. Thank you.
Next up, Stuart Linder.
Good afternoon. My name is Stuart Linder, and I'm a candidate for the Board of Directors. To everyone here, thank you for taking the time and showing the interest to attend. And I'd also like to thank the Elections Committee for their hard work and moving this process forward. My family and I arrived here June of 1996. Since that time, I have served on the board, several committees of the board, and as a delegate to MGCA. It is these experiences that have both broadened and deepened my knowledge and appreciation for both the community and the corporation. My work with the New York State Education Department requires self-starting and collaborative skills, helping families with disabilities receive their due process rights. I work with very strict timelines as defined by law and regulation. They are sort of unforgiving, and it must be very time conscious and aware of deadlines. I also know that a quiet voice can be heard much more easily than a din of shouters. MHHC has many wonderful elements. Our aesthetic beauty, being in an urban area surrounded by greenery, is wonderful. Our amenities, whether thinking of the Morningside Players, our fitness center, our array of different clubs, our supports, MRHS, our Division of Public Safety, the Maintenance Department. They assist us in many different ways. This combined with our infrastructure and our tradition of volunteerism adds to our quality of life and our identity here as shareholders. But this also must be managed by oversight by very strict financial wisdom and with the belief that our dollars are going in the right direction. I know how to prioritize, I know how to multitask also, and of these elements, sometimes more attention must be paid to one than the other. See Local Law 11 on that one. If elected, I will consider all issues very carefully. I believe in learning about an issue and taking a stand based on full and complete knowledge of it and information, not partial information. My decisions, if elected, I'm sure will please some people and probably disappoint other people. But I believe that whatever decision I make will be in the interest of the community and the corporation. I hope you consider me for your vote.
Next up, Madeline Pratt.
Hi, thanks for being here today. It's good to see all of you. Those of you who show up, show an interest in your community and in its governance. So it's good that you took the time to be here. I'm just going to talk briefly about the qualities I think I have that would make me an effective board member. Two of them being, I'm a hard worker, and I'm a good problem solver. And in my years in both business and academia, I've always had positive, productive relationships with people I worked for, people I worked with, and people who worked under me, who reported to me. So I think that that makes a case for kind of being a person who can bring people together and get things done. So let me tell you a little bit about the things I've done that might support those claims. From 2000 to 2011, I was an assistant professor of biology at FIT, and I designed and implemented their very first online science course, as well as my other teaching duties. In addition, I conducted a clinical trial under their auspices for a very large lingerie company called Wacol. Some of the women in the audience might remember that company or know that company. Prior to that, I spent 13 years working for a company called Wang Laboratories, They weren't a scientific company. They were a large mini computer company and a word processing company. They were very big in the 80s. I had a lot of jobs with them. I was promoted 7 times in 13 and a half years, and I managed a group of over 50 consultants and analysts. And I also implemented and designed and managed their very first hotline service for customers. In those days, customer service was big. Any computer company spent their time doing customer service. And in between those 2 positions was a big gap of time, and that's when I went back to school after my children had received their undergraduate degrees and got a doctorate in neurobiology. The 2 areas I'm especially interested in, if I got your vote and was elected to the board, are board communications. I really think there needs to be better communications. Either we improve that through MPCA. I see my time is up. Thank you for listening, and I'd appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Next up, Alva Francis.
I would like to pay with my back to my colleagues. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this meeting. Thank you for coming. My name is Dora Frankis, and I'm a candidate for the board of directors. I hope you'll support my candidacy the way you did in 1996 and in 2006. My husband, our infant son, and I moved to Morningside Garden in 1962, and it has been our only home ever since. We raised 2 children here. 2 of them became shareholders in their own right, and our first grandchild was born here. While I lived here, I earned a PhD in medical sciences at Columbia University and became an associate professor at Cornell Medical School. My professional experience includes managing employees, preparing detailed budgets, data analysis, long-range planning, and building teamwork among supervisors, colleagues, and employees. I served on the board of directors between 1996 and 1999, and in 2006, I found myself in the dual role of president and acting manager. I served as acting manager for 6 months and as president for 3 years. I also have served on many MHHC committees. Long-time residents will certainly not forget the deep ditches that scarred our grounds in the late 1990s after the major infrastructure work. I chaired the grant committee at the time, and we worked tirelessly to restore the ground on very, very, very limited budget. My most challenging role was chairing the ERHA committee on resale prices. It involved extensive evaluation of MHHC financial needs for restoring a 50-year-old complex, the ability of shareholders to raise the needed funds versus generating the money through flip tax, and consideration of the community's tradition of being a home to middle-class and middle-income families. It was a long, challenging process. Eventually, the shareholders spoke, the price was changed, and to this date, FlipTex generated $11.5 million, just about the total cost of Local Law 11. The completion of Local Law 11 reminded us that we live in an urban jewel. Just about every potential shareholder tells us that at the tenant selection committee interview that the ground is what attracted them. If I were asked to name the first item I would focus on if elected, my response would be grounds. Long-range planning, I would like to work with long-range planning committee, system and structure, and grounds to develop an affordable plan to return Morningside Garden to its former ground level. Thank you.
Next
Michael Dimon. Of all the folks here running for office, I'm the newest at Morningside Gardens. I was a contractor in Manhattan for many years, as well as an IT consultant. For the last 10 years or so, I've been in upper management at a mid-sized corporation. Move out a little bit so I can see these folks over here. Hi. Guiding the overall direction of the company and running large multi-year projects. I'm slowly phasing out of my employment there, but I'll go on as an advisor and consultant. For most of my life, I've taken a reality-based approach to estimating and budgets. That's been my business. Morningside Gardens needs more of that. There's low cost, and there's the most cost-efficient approach, and I know the difference. I also know how to negotiate and how to conciliate. I can accomplish my goals, but I can also listen to others, hear their ideas, and flexibly integrate them when they're valid. I'll be bringing this experience and my wide open eyes to the office of a member of the board of directors. For the last couple of years, I've gotten some insight as to how Morningside is run via my activities on several committees: systems and structures, bylaws, long-range planning, and finance. I've spoken with many board members as well as fellow shareholders, and I've gained a good understanding about the dynamics of MHHC. As I've been campaigning, I've been listening to your comments about a fair number of issues, from the noise of the leaf blowers to the noise of dissension. I'm running with a slate of candidates I truly respect, but I can see utility in some of the ideas of the other camp. Now, camps. You know, camps are fun for a few weeks in the summer, but I don't think they're the best way to run a relatively small democracy, and that's what we've got here. I think they result in less nuanced positions, more of a focus on sound bites, on gotchas, and less on thoughtful conversation. We need more independent thought. Lately, we've seen initiatives come to the board and committees in which the presenter was unsure of what the issue really was. Clearly, these motions were being offered at the behest and direction of somebody else. We're all volunteers putting in huge amounts of time and energy for the betterment of the community. But political machinations like this are sure to turn off people who would otherwise collaborate and contribute. Lastly, we need to realize that this community and all it contains is ours. Ours to enjoy and cherish, but ours to maintain. Some at Morningside believe they will fix it. Well, folks, they is us. We have to pay our taxes, pay for our gas and electricity, rebuild our infrastructure, and pay to maintain this nearly 60-year-old property. This can be done efficiently and cost-effectively, but it has to be done. If we manage realistically and intelligently, this can continue to be a haven for us for generations to come. Thank you.
Next speaker, Caroline.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm sorry. Thank you for coming. I just got a little cold today, so it started. That's why my voice is a little different. And then I hope it won't affect your listening to my next, whatever, the statement. Okay, I'm Chi Zhao Yuan. Everybody knows me as Chi. And then my family and I have lived in Morningside Gardens since 1995. I was on the board for 4 terms, that's 12 years, and was the treasurer and the chair of the finance committee for 9 years. And then I'm currently serve on 3 committees: finance, security, and tenant selection committee. And then here some of my accomplishments during the years I was treasurer achieved with the support of majority of board members. The first one is minimize the maintenance increases. Total maintenance increases from 2001 to 2008, that's 8 years, was 17%, with an average annual increase of 2%, as compared to the last 6 years from 2009 and 2014, when the total maintenance increases was 37%, cumulatively 42%. With an average annual increase of 6%. I was not the treasurer when the board approved the 15.14% maintenance increase for 2011, and then I voted against it. The second one is eliminated unnecessary overtime, which cost MHHC more than $1.1 million between 2008 and May 2011. And I worked vigorously with other board members to put MHHC's financial situation back on the right track. The third, discovered the 45 vacant residence parking spaces due to the mismanagement by the previous manager. Ensured those spaces were rented to shareholders, increasing the parking income by about $70,000 a year, and significantly reducing the resident parking waiting list. Fourth, obtained an affordable loan for MHHC that did not raise our maintenance, paid off our previous mortgage, and brought in $16 million for MHHC's capital improvement. I understand that the board faces various challenges at different times. In dealing with any challenge, it is crucial that the board works as a team, and then every director should show respect not only to each other but also to shareholders and employees. The board needs to effectively monitor management work in maintaining, upgrading the infrastructure, and finding ways to minimize maintenance increase. Thank you for your consideration and continued support. Thank you again.
Next speaker, James Campbell.
Hello, my name is James Campbell. In October, I was appointed to the board of directors to fill a vacancy. I really had no idea what I was getting myself into, but now that I do, believe it or not, I would actually like to continue this vital work, and here's why. One of the reasons my family and I moved here was that we were actually very excited to participate in a community that shared so many of our core values as a family. MHHC is a purposefully multicultural, multi-generational, broadly inclusive cooperative. This remains so, years after reconstitution and resale price changes, because so many people in this room and on these grounds worked so hard to keep the vision of MHHC alive with events like the Hands Across the Street potluck, which I participated in this year. But my experience is a new generation of leaders with that same vision needs to rise up, or we risk losing our distinctiveness as a cooperative. And if I'm elected to the board, I will work on preserving that unique culture. But MHHC is far more than just some social vision from 1957. We are bricks and mortar and grass and mortgages and maintenance. As somebody who bought my apartment in 2007, I paid a great deal of money for it. It is the most significant investment that my family has. We worked very, very hard to get here. And I'm conscious of the fact that for some people in our cooperative, it's increasingly difficult for them to stay here. So the board must make decisions that protect our investment, number one, and number two, never forget the human dimension of all the decisions we make. I'll balance both of those things responsibly. But more board membership is also about this, and I want to underscore this in my remarks. The board must lead in creating a less contentious community at the Gardens. As a relatively new resident, I am regularly dismayed, after 7 years, dismayed by the level of animosity and distrust that exists in our community. Old rivalries never seem to die, never, despite yearly promises on reams of paper slid under your doors that they will, they don't. In my professional life as a Protestant minister, I work regularly with people who vociferously disagree with one another, and it is my job to help them build bridges for the good of the whole community. Words alone never ever accomplish that. What it takes is compromise on both sides, intent, listening, and a willingness to change your mind about things you've believed sometimes for generations, to bring about good community. Morningside Gardens needs to reboot, and I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Next speaker, Jenna Alls.
I just need a moment. Higher. Oh, I feel bad for all these people over here. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. One more to go. Are you ready? Okay. So, this co-op is self-governing. To function, it needs volunteers like me and all of these to step forward, and it needs people like all of you to come, to listen, to become educated, and to participate. Thank you all for caring and for attending this afternoon. We're all stockholders in a corporation. At the same time, this is our home. Since Morningside Gardens is both an investment and a home, it's doubly important to me that it be managed well. I stood before you in this room 5 years ago running for the board, a bit more naive than now, but having already attended board meetings regularly and been an MGCA officer, I was prepared for the complex nature of this corporation. Serving on the board opened my eyes further to the intricacies of our co-op. In the 2 years since completing my board term, I've stayed involved. I serve on 4 committees and chair 2 of them, and very importantly, I attend the local Law 11 meetings. This is where our contractors meet. They discuss how to coordinate our construction projects, how to move them forward, and how to comply with a multitude of city regulations. Through my involvement, I've gained a wealth of knowledge about property management. I now can put that knowledge to work for you. I did some soul searching as to whether I wanted to be on the board again and make that time commitment. I know it's a lot of work. I concluded I do want to serve again for the following reason. Morningside Gardens is at a very special time. There are wonderful opportunities in front of us. I want to ensure that we capture each and every one of them. We currently face win-win situations where through efficiencies, costs can be lowered and quality of life can be enhanced. I'll foster open and honest discussion, respectful discussion based on facts in order to reach smart decisions. I'll avoid unwise decisions such as the disastrous metal chimney, which I opposed while on the board at that time. We can add sensors to our heating system to deliver heat more evenly, thus saving money on fuel and increasing your comfort. We need to replace our indoor and outdoor lighting and can do so with lights that are both more efficient and more attractive. We'll save money on electricity and have more beautiful surroundings. These are 2 examples of beneficial opportunities just in need of good decisions to become realities. I'll work to ensure all actions by the Board of Directors are in your best interest. Thank you.
Thank you. It is now time for us to take questions from our shareholders. The first ticket holder is number 151. Cynthia, I'm afraid you can't ask a question until we go around to everyone that wasn't here on Thursday night. And I made that announcement in the beginning.
It's me. Or did you get that question or
I can't hear you.
You said who wasn't here.
If you ask a question on Thursday night, you have to wait until all the newcomers
just a minute.
are taken care of. Yes. Ticket number 161. Oh, 151? Okay, come on, Bonnie. I'm sorry, you have to raise your hand. Oh, okay. Come on, Lonnie.
living in building 2 since 1962. Okay. My question goes to James Campbell and Michael Dimon. In the past, some board meetings opened with a closed session, so that those of us who wanted to attend the meeting were not admitted for hours on end. How do you propose organizing board meetings to avoid delay and to encourage cooperators' interest and attendance? And my second question goes to
Thank you for the question, Lottie. I think it's never good form to have closed session first. I was among the group of people often waiting to get into board meetings while closed sessions were going on several years ago. I remember some inclement weather. I remember some very late nights, some very cold weather, and I remember shareholders leaving to go home. So I think it's bad form to do that. So I would suggest that we continue the form that we've had for the 6 months I've sat on the board, which is that open sessions come first, closed sessions come afterwards, and the shareholders are allowed to go home. I think it's a matter of simply making a way of communication that's most accessible to the shareholders. And that would be for you all to be able to come to board meetings at 7:30 and not later. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Okay, ticket number. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, dear.
Sorry, I thought you just asked for one.
I agree with James, and I think that he used the word that is most relevant in this answer, and that is communication. That the board needs to communicate more directly and more frequently with shareholders and find means of doing that, whether it means parking a board member in a lobby on a Saturday afternoon or Tuesday evening, or having more frequent town hall sessions so that shareholders can speak directly to the board. In my first meeting, the first board meeting I attended, I turned to my neighbor sitting next to me, and I said, when do we get to speak? And his answer was never. And that didn't sit well with me, and it still doesn't. I think there needs to be more direct communication and more ability for the board to hear what people are thinking, and more ability for our folks to speak directly to the board.
Anyone else care to answer? Okay, ticket number 161.
The last four numbers, these tickets have 6 numbers.
The last three numbers.
This question is to Detta. Oh, my name, sorry. Roy Davidson, Building 2. This question is to Detta. It has been asserted that New York City regulations required us to build a metal chimney. You were on the board at that time. Can you speak about your recollection of this further? You were very much in favor of Morningside building a brick chimney. Can you elaborate on this?
Hi, thank you for the question. I am someone with a very good memory and very good note-taking, and very detail-oriented. So I am in a place to answer. On the board at the time, there was the possibility that in the future, with brick chimneys, a metal liner would be required. That regulation was not in place at the time, and we could have built a brick chimney with the regular fire brick liner. It's doubtful we would have been asked to retrofit it, because once you build something under one regulation, your grandfather clause in, even if it changes. What I was really in support of at the time was to have an honest and open discussion among the board about the best chimney for us. I would say more than me supporting a brick chimney was that I really wanted to just do a fair evaluation and look at how long does a brick one last? How much does it cost? How much does that average out per year? How long does a metal one last? What does that cost? What's the cost then per year? I wanted to, we were promised pie in the sky by a company that said they could install a metal chimney in 6 weeks. From my attendance at Local Law 11 meetings, I knew that wasn't possible. I knew we weren't going to be able to begin to get the permits from the city that we needed in that length of time. I mean, the city was not streamlining anything for us. They were doing the opposite. So, I mean, I knew that was unrealistic. I really just wanted to be able to have a real board discussion and consider everything in a factual way and make the decision that would have been best for us. And so, anyway, that didn't happen at the time, and I'm sorry for the result.
That question was asked to Deb, so Deb responded.
Ticket number 158.
Aren't there other people who want to respond?
No.
It was asked to
Yeah,
Jennifer.
yeah, yeah.
All right.
So I was on the board too, when we did the chimney. What the situation was that we were under enormous pressure because we were approaching the heating season. Our chimney was crumbling. We had the temporary boilers out. It was costing us, I think it was about $100,000 a month. And we had this, and our engineer, Skylar Engineering, was one of our advisors, remains one of our advisors, advised us to put up a metal chimney, in part because of cost, in part because of effectiveness, and in part because of the New York City Administrative Code was going to require that, not that we couldn't do a brick chimney, but as Detta was referring to, it would have to have the metal liner, which was an additional, which would be an additional issue. And that is indeed, if you look at the New York City Administrative Code starting in 2012, which is when this thing would have gone up, that was the case. So we were left with this situation. And then we had in terms of the vendors, we put out for bid. We got 3 vendors in. They were reviewed by our engineers and architects, as well as us. We picked what we considered to be a reputable firm with a low price, and then they put it up, and they have failed. I mean, they have not done a good job. It was a mess. I'd say it was probably the biggest frustration that I had on the board, and we had a lot of frustrations. It's, now I think the issue is mitigation. What do we do now? And I want to make sure that we have, because that was always the case, whatever we have, and because the thing is an eyesore, we have to make sure that, and there are ways that we can make it look better, or ways that we can make it look better than it is now. And I want to make sure that we do this, and that's what I think should be a priority in this summer. Thank you.
Just for clarity, looking at the December 8th, 2011 special meeting minutes, the motion for the chimney replacement and winter heating adequacy, this motion carried 8 in favor: Chris Berg, John Carter, Chi, Dan Lowenstein, Jeanette, Doug Simmons, Maitri Singh, Jerry Tenenbaum, 1 abstention, Detta all. I just think it's important we know who voted what.
What concerns me mostly about this ISO is the approach of penny, wide, dollar, foolish. It's a perfect example if you don't do it the first time right, when you do have the money and time to do it right. If we were now to do it right, it will cost us over $1 million to get rid of the ISO, and it should be a brick chimney. What bothers me is that the idea that we are going discussion. The fact is, we had the heating system, the whole heating system, we had temporary boiler, and it worked. So this excuse of we were under pressure, I know that when we did the elevator, we were under pressure, elevators were not working. But guess what? We kept them going, and we did it right. And this is what bothered me about the chimney. Penny wise, dollar foolish, lack of consideration of what the architecture of this place is. Thank you.
Are there any other responses?
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say something about this decision, because as Dan mentioned that we have reviewed a few bids we reviewed on the board, and that's when I was on the board too. We reviewed a few bids with brick, also with metal. And then the reason we went with this international chimney company, they were building metal because it's faster. At that time, I believe it's September, October. We thought it should be done really quickly. So, but it didn't happen that way. And then we did do research. It's not, we didn't do any research. I always like to do my own research no matter what. And then, but this company was pretty reputable. They had projects in West Point. They had projects in Columbia. So, but of course, each project can be different. So, and then also, if you say we could have done a brick chimney, so just remember, if we do a brick chimney, it requires double of the time, and then also we need to run the temporary boiler, the same thing. So the cost will be higher, and then we can't save the temporary boiler and the gas for that winter either. So either way, it's the same. But I will say that we should learn from this project, and then to avoid this kind of thing, maybe we should just monitor the contractor better when they start working on this project. So thank you for listening.
I was not on the board at the time, but as I mentioned in my opening remarks, I was a contractor for many years. When I heard that this chimney was going to be completed by January 31st, now let's remember that January is the middle of the winter. Construction work slows to a crawl, so is molasses, and they move at about the same speed in the middle of the winter. The idea that, number one, I didn't expect to make such an explosive statement. The idea that a chimney could be completed in a 6-week time frame is preposterous. In addition, we had a contractor on site who had submitted all his insurance certificates to us, who was permitted by the city, who had scaffolding up around the chimney. I understand we had a bid from him. I don't even know what the bids were. I understand his bid was reasonably close, but I'm not sure exactly where Brent's was. But clearly, to then turn to the city and say, okay, well, now we need a permit to take down the scaffolding that's up on the chimney. We need another permit to put up new scaffolding that's on the chimney. And we're going to start a brand new contractor to build this new chimney, means that there's a real cost consideration that obviously wasn't looked at carefully enough. As a contractor, as a contractor and a non-participant, I threw up my hands and said, this is silly. I wouldn't have done it. That's all I can say. I wasn't there, but that's my opinion.
I was not on the board either when the initial discussions about what type of chimney and time frame cost were being discussed. But earlier, when I was presenting for my 3 minutes, I was talking about one of the elements that I really cherish about this place, the aesthetic beauty. And even if everything went smoothly and the metal chimney went up and it was erected perfectly, we will have several generations of an eyesore to look at. Several people, several shareholders over the years have approached me and asked, why this? And I said, I can't comment on it, but they said, it reminds me that we're in a steel house, that we're in, is this Pittsburgh? Are we in an industrial area? They see the disconnect between the aesthetics of the metal chimney and the rest of our community. And sometimes it's better to work a little bit slower and put up a project correctly over a long period of time than to race with something that has some problems.
I'm on the tenant selection committee this past year, and this issue came up at tenant selection, which is as you know, very important committee because we're selling apartments, which when we sell more apartments, people pay more maintenance, all of our costs stay reasonable. The people with direct sight lines to the chimney complained about not being able to get what they thought was a fair price because of the chimney. So that's another area in which it's impacted our community. Not just that I don't like to look at it when I walk the grounds, it's that people looking at it from their apartments have complained that buyers 2 times looked out the window and said to Frank, I'll go look at something else. So it's a problem that needs to be fixed, and I don't think it was well considered in the beginning. I was not on the board, but the difference between brick and metal is very big, and it is about aesthetics for me as somebody running for the board.
Anyone else would like to respond? Okay, ticket number 158. Right here. Name and building number.
My name is Dan Freeman. I'm known as Danny Freeman. In Building 3, Apartment 19G. My parents, I acquired my parents' apartment legally. They were original shareholders in 1957. I know this is a statement, we're not allowed it. I just wanted to say that. I have a question for Tova Francis. Since the future of Morningside depends so much on revenue, our budget, etc., how do you enhance the value and the ability to bring in the flip tax on transfer of apartments, which is so vital to the future?
Dan, I'm not quite sure what your question is.
What plan would you, what do you think is the most important thing, some of the important things we can do to increase the sale of apartments so that the flip tax will enable us to continue without having to raise the maintenance costs?
Okay, thank you. The good news is that with the increase in prices in Manhattan, we have sold this last year 39 apartments. And we actually got $1.6 million, $1.63 million in flip tax. Improving our grounds is crucial, absolutely crucial, to get an increase in sales and increase in the price. Our sidewalks need to be done, and they need to be done properly, so we don't have patchwork. I know I almost fell flat on my face, stumbling upon our uneven ground. The other thing, we need to make sure we have a good plan for complete restoration of the ground. And I don't mean a new master plan. I mean, look at what we get and get people that design planting, not architects, and really make it a real jewel. It can be done. It will probably take time because right now we do not have the money for it. We will need for it $1 million. Right now we have $5 million in the fund reserve, and the chunk of it is basically committed for ongoing work. So we will have to do it stepwise, but if we have a plan in place, we could do it. Thank you.
Danny, thank you for that question. So it is important. Of course, the more we can raise in flip tax, the better reserve we have for our capital projects, and then we won't need to go back and take out another loan. And that, of course, keeps our maintenance lower because we're not paying for the debt service in our maintenance. So we are going to benefit from some things that are just going on around us. Columbia is expanding. The Economic Development Corporation is doing a very nice street enhancement project over by the river. So our property values will be going up along with the rest of Manhattan. The things that we can do ourselves to make sure those values go up. Our hallway lights, they've been discontinued. Now we have a chance to replace them with something much more beautiful. Our outdoor lights had to come down, many of them, during Local Law 11. Those were like the rather unattractive gooseneck lights that are like more suitable for a highway. So now we can replace them with, again, something that's much more aesthetic. These also will happen to be more efficient, so it's going to keep our maintenance down. As Tova said, of course, working on the grounds is important. And also, we have a lot of amenities here. I think we need to better communicate with all prospective buyers about these amenities because they'll be quite excited if they knew the extent to which that we have a theater group, we have a ceramics room, we have a wood shop, we have a gym, we have a playroom, we have a game room, you know. So there's a host of things we can do that's going to make people really excited to buy in here and keep our values high, and then get that flip tax money so that we don't have to borrow for our capital needs. Thank you.
Hi. So I think definitely we're selling a lot more apartments, we're getting money in terms of flip tax, but I think we also need to look at other ways of getting revenue, ways that do not mean that we're getting additional money from our shareholders, or raising fees on different amenities for our shareholders. So some of the things that we can do are, we're in the process of doing it as a board, making sure that we get tenants in place, that we don't have vacancies in terms of having large real estate commercial spaces that lie empty. We want to make sure that they get the right kind of tenants in our commercial spaces, people who are paying a good dollar per square foot. So I think there are other things that we should be doing and we need to be doing actively for the next 7 years, so that when the balloon payment is due, that we've raised those funds from external sources in addition from just getting money from our shareholders.
Okay, a couple things. First of all, just one point of clarification for what Tova said on our reserve fund. Tova did not include a fairly substantial chunk of money that we have, which is in our escrow account, which is about $4 million. And so it actually, while a lot of the money is budgeted, we're in good shape. I think we're in solid shape in terms of the projects that we have on the books that we're doing now, and that we expect to do over the next few years, with some money that we can use for additional projects should we decide that those are priorities. Flip tax is coming in at a steady clip. That's good. Now, in terms of what we need, what could increase our property value, all the things that people said, very important. A couple other things that people didn't say. Number one, community, civility. There's a lot of, there are, just like we've heard stories about the aesthetics, which are really important. We've also heard stories about people saying this place is it's a nest. And, people here are crazy. I mean, they get stuff under the doors, and this is, I don't want to live here.
I mean, that's, you know, I mean, for better or worse, that's what people are thinking, some people. Also, maintenance. There is an absolute direct, indirect correlation between how maintenance goes up and the price you get for your apartment. It's not, this is not, I mean, ask any real estate agent who has said, oh, you know, your maintenance is a little high here. I'm sorry, but you're not gonna get what you want on your apartment. It's you know, that's what people do. They look at what they're gonna be spending every month, and when they take out that mortgage, they're gonna have this much to spend, total. And if they're paying X in maintenance, they're gonna be spending X minus 3 in whatever the algebra is on their apartment in terms of the mortgage payment. So that's very important too. Thank you.
This issue is very complicated, but I have a little different take on it as somebody who bought in and paid, as I said in my opening statement, a tremendous amount of money for my apartment, and somebody who sits on the tenant selection committee. The way we spend money and how the grounds look and how the sidewalk is and how the flowers are and how the balconies look and how the roof railings look and how the bricks look all make a tremendous difference to people like me who pay such a great amount of money to come and live here. So it is an investment that then produces more income, because people then come to Morningside Gardens and say, wow, look at this place, I'm willing to spend $600,000 to live that far uptown, because things are so well cared for, which increases the flip tax, which decreases the amount of empty apartments. So this thing works together, and I think that it's easy, I think it's part of Morningside's legacy from my perspective, to sometimes be penny wise but pound foolish. I also said in my opening statement that I'm conscious of those people who have a hard time staying here, and I mean that. So for me, I'm not just about the bottom line. There's a human element here, but this is a corporation and a community, and both things have to live side by side in order to be healthy, both things.
Just a quick thing on one of Dan's points about maintenance. It's important to know that when you go before the tenant selection committee, and she could, you know, confirm this or correct me if I'm wrong. One of the things is the tenant selection committee doesn't want to see you if your debt to income ratio as a potential buyer isn't good. The numbers have to be exact, or you're just not considered, no matter how wonderful of a person you are. So the maintenance is very important. The cost of the maintenance will, the higher it goes up, the more difficult it will make for somebody with their loan to fit into the debt to income ratio that we require. So I can't underline that, yes, the grounds have to look good, and we have to get people to be excited about living here. But if our maintenance goes up too high, there's going to be a good segment of people that no matter what, their numbers will just not match up to move in here. So I think that's a big consideration for me as a potential board member in assessing how we run the grounds and the whole co-op.
I want to comment first about the item that Toba mentioned, that 39 apartment sales. This is at a time when there are still scaffolding and bridges in display, that our community still has its own beauty beyond that people are still gravitating here. I am somewhat optimistic then when Local Law 11 is officially closed and we have our campus back as we know it pre-Local Law 11, it will attract that and some more. And hopefully the numbers will be even higher. As to the maintenance, of course, I would prefer maintenance never go up. I don't think that's it's in the same sentence as I wish taxes wouldn't go up also. But what do we get for our maintenance? What are we maintaining with our maintenance? And to compare it to some other co-ops is not necessarily fair, since we have unique services here with our gardens, with all of the elements that I talked about. Sometimes comparing it to other places is comparing apples to tuna fish. So I think it's important to recognize what we do get with all of our fees, and it is pretty outstanding.
I just want to say a few points regarding that. Is the first thing Dan has mentioned that I just want to tell people where we are in the funded reserve account. When you receive your annual report, if you look at our audited financials, you will see the funded reserve in our account, including the bank's escrow. At the end of December 31st last year, it was 12 million. So we still have flip taxes coming in each year. And then we mentioned earlier, some people said last year we had 39 apartments sold. We had better years before that. Some years we can sell like more than 50 apartments, like 55, 57. We did that. So from this year, I think the sales looks better. But the other key thing for me is very important is we should prioritize all our capital improvements. I understand like grounds is one thing we need to do, and then also the exterior lighting, and then other things. We hope we can do. Some people already mentioned our hallway, floors, whatever is not so good. So we can all look at all those different projects, but we need to prioritize each year to see which one we do first. That's it.
Okay, ticket number 159. Okay, ticket number 154. Number 153.
I asked mine on Thursday.
Number 155.
Hi, can you hear me? I'm Hyla Thomas. I live in Building 3, apartment 18H. A lot has been said about building civility, maintaining civility, whatever you want to call it. I'm wondering if anybody before us, any of the candidates, would like to reflect upon the importance of Robert's Rules of Order, or something approaching it, something maybe not exactly Robert's Rules, but something in which board members, and especially the president, learn how to run a meeting in an orderly fashion. It's my impression that the quality of our meetings has gone down. And I suspect that that's because we don't have a parliamentarian, we never have had. The sense of how you call the question, you do not call it from the chair, for heaven's sakes. Some of this stuff you can learn by getting yourself in Robert's Rules and reading it. So I'd like to know what you on the dais think about this. Anyone may answer.
Hi, Hyla. Okay, thank you for the question. Prior to serving on the board, I was already very familiar with Robert's Rules of Order. I've been part of organizations that use Robert's Rules of Order to conduct their meetings. I do find them to be very effective and a good way to run group meetings. So I would be very much in favor of operating our board meetings more closely along those lines. I know I was I was given a book actually during one of the boards I was on. Everybody on the board got a book of Robert's Rules of Order. So it does help. Meetings with 11 people in the room, they need to have organization. They definitely do, and they need to have a fair organization. It needs to be an organization where every voice is heard, but yet things are moved along. And it shouldn't be a contest about who's loudest. And I think everybody could relax more too if there was a process in place that they knew just how the meeting's going to be conducted, and they knew when it's their chance to speak up. And you can relax a lot more when something is predictable like that. And so, thank you.
I'll just add quickly, I'm a big proponent of Robert's Rules of Order. They use them in the organization where I work. It does keep things usually civil and moving along, so efficiency is part of it. But I've also seen Robert's Rules of Order misused to silence people, and I think that's always inappropriate, especially when you're trying to make important decisions. So it's not always appropriate for a board of directors to always work toward consensus, but I think a consensus model mixed in with a good dose of Robert's Rules is probably a good way to go.
Yeah, since I have been on the board for a few terms, so I know for the first 3 terms or maybe 2 terms, Hyla, when you were the president, I remember we really followed the Robert's Rules very well, and then also later on we also got, I think in one term, the president really distribute the Robert's Rules, like a abbreviated version to all the board members. And then, but I think the past few years, the current year, I'm not on the board, and then the board hasn't been following the Robert's Rules entirely. So I think one thing is critical is the president is the leader of the board. It really should follow the Robert's Rules if what the board is going to do. So, and then all the other board members should also respect each other so that the board meetings can run more efficiently, and then also in a respectful way to each other.
All I can say is that if elected, I will get the book and memorize it.
Hyla, you will not like my answer. I said, I was on the board when you were president, and you ran everything perfectly under Robert's Rules of Order. What I suggest is that when the next board convenes, you give us instructions of how to run a meeting by Robert's Rules of Order. I've read the book before. It's like, what, 700 pages? We don't really need 700 pages. There are basics that we need to know. And since you know them so well, I'd love to get lessons from you.
So I've heard many discussions about Robert's Rules of Order, and I think we do have to have a clear vision and a clear structure for conducting meetings. That's paramount. As long as it, as somebody else says, it doesn't get in the way of conducting a fair meeting and allowing everybody to have access to the chair and to speak. So I think it's a good idea that everybody that gets on the board, if they don't already, have a good working knowledge of Robert's Rules, that they make it their business to get a good working knowledge of it.
I had technical assistance on Robert's Rules for at least 2 of my 3 years on the board, serving under Hyla. And I agree that civility and a clear and respectful atmosphere produces a lot of work that can be otherwise thwarted, putting out forest fires during meetings. But besides Robert's rules, which is the formal way of going about it, I think there's good old-fashioned common sense and common courtesy. And I don't have to look at what page it's listed on in the 700 pages. I think some of that is intuitively obvious for decent people who want to do the right thing. And I think the people at the dais are decent people. We all want to do the right thing. I certainly can use the Robert Rules for Dummies edition, maybe not the 700-page one. That would be appreciated. But I also know that I've somewhat mastered the skills of decency and behaving in meetings. I think it's really important. I also think there's a correlation between the behavior of the board and the motivation of people to be part of the gallery observing a meeting. I think that if I know in advance that it's going to be a strife-filled war zone and inappropriate behavior, I don't want to waste my precious time unless there is a outstandingly important issue that's on the agenda, because it would serve to, and quite honestly, sadden me to see our leadership behave in such a way.
There we go. I think some kind of rules of order are very important, and I familiarize myself with at least the Cliff Notes version of it, and I think that it's been, when I was president, I think I tried to abide by that. I think that it helps where there is, I think, a mutual respect and some kind of common agreement to get through an agenda with enough discussion to inform the issues that we're talking about, but not enough. But when it becomes something that drags the meeting down and out and longer, because people are using Robert's rules as essentially a weapon, as was I think the case with some of the folks that I dealt with on the board, it becomes problematic. It also speaks to it's our ability to get business done. We want to be clear-headed, and I think this also speaks to the issue of when we had a closed session versus open session in the beginning. Of course, we wanted to have open session. We want to have shareholders there. The problem was that the meetings went so long because the discussion became so contentious that by the time we got to some really important closed sessions, business that we had to conduct, it was 12 o'clock at night, and here we are trying to make decisions that are critical to the co-op in closed session, where we, where we're all bleary-eyed and wanted to go home. So.
So I think my time on the board has been very interesting, because I think I've unfortunately been subject to loud, basically people being talked over, being kind of bullied. I don't feel like there's been a fair process, and I think what this has made me do is basically yell to be heard, which I think the last time I ever yelled this much was when I was a teenager in boarding school in India, yelling across the dorm. But unfortunately, that's what you're reduced to, because there's not a fair process, and people get talked over, and in order for you to be heard, you have to play in a way that's not fair. And I think that is something that is very disappointing, and it's intimidating. And I think there are a lot of people who ask me why I'm doing this again, is because I feel like we need to restore our process to a time and to a place where we are civil, we are fair, everybody gets a voice. It's just because you have a quiet voice doesn't mean that it needs to be diminished. So I think that is another reason why I'm running for the board again, because I feel like I have learned to reclaim my voice and capture my voice in a way that I think many people cannot, and many people need to be represented. And I think that this is something that there should not be an environment of intimidation. There should be rules. We should follow the rules. Everyone has their time. If you don't like what I have to say, please don't talk over me. Don't raise your hand at me.
Just one quick thing on this. I agree with Stuart Maitre, what the others have said about the importance of civility, and I think civility is important even before Robert's Rules. How you can imagine where Robert's Rules breaks down is if anybody attended the annual meeting last year, you can only imagine from the conduct of one of the members of the board who spoke there, how Robert's Rules may not help you, because if you actually don't have mutual respect, civility, a respectful tone of voice, which can be typical for me too sometimes because I have a low voice and I don't need to sound too gravelly, but if you don't have those things as a base, I think Robert's Rules isn't going to help us. If you do have that, I think it's a great way to conduct a meeting, and I've enjoyed learning what I have over the last 2 years as I've seen it used. Thank you.
Okay, ticket number 160. 160.
My name is Paula Hertz, Building 3, Apartment 17. So this is to all the candidates. What do you see as the differences and contrasts that divide the community? And is this just old history, or are there different approaches and views about what Morningside is and can be? Thank you.
My brain's a little shot. I just drove from Norfolk, Virginia this morning to here. So I don't want to sound repetitive. But I do think in some respects we do have to put past history to rest. And like many of us, I am uncomfortable with the divisions, even though I'm very comfortable with some of the people I've advocated for running for the board in terms of the decisions they've made. That's, you can see in my bio, some of the material that has gone out with my name on it. But yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that it would be helpful for everybody to put past histories to rest, especially with many of the new shareholders that I've spoken with, because it seems quite daunting to them to try and understand what happened, who's correct, and it can also turn them off from participating, which is something we wouldn't want.
So in terms of differences, I think there were a couple of questions in the last Meet the Candidates that were pretty thought-provoking. One of the questions was about a slate. You know, do people feel, you know, this is there a purpose for a slate? Are the divisions getting more and more entrenched? And I think everybody said the right thing, right? Everybody said that we don't want a slate. We want to include not just the 7 people who have the majority, but you know, we want opinions of all 11. It's funny because there was an email circulated with pretty pointed and critical comments about the 5 of us on the other seat. So I think it's pretty amusing, I guess, that I think here we say one thing and then we practice something else. So I think that's just disappointing. So I mean, I hope we do get to a point where we talk about issues, that when we have board meetings, we actually come to debate and hear each other, so that there aren't these divisions, and then there isn't this, us versus them. So I mean, that is my hope. I think so far between Thursday and Sunday, I haven't seen it yet, but I'm going to keep my fingers crossed.
It's a good question. I think, so, there's a number of things that have divided us in the past that, may still be fueling this, but really shouldn't be anymore. Resale prices is by and large done. I mean, whatever, feelings we had, and we held them deeply about how this affected our community, I think we're over with that. The maximum resale prices are far above market, and it's like a moot case right now. And I think we can move on from something like that, knowing that we still value this community, we still want this place to be a good middle class community to live in, and how do we achieve this now? Other issues, the general manager, McMahon, okay? However you felt about it, hopefully, this is history now, and we have a new management in place, and we have to manage them, we have to oversee them effectively so we can get the services that we deserve. And hopefully we are done with that argument now. Unfortunately, it seems like sometimes we're not. I mean, you read the Morningside Gardens news, and they're just bringing up this stuff, and it seems like they're just trying to stoking stuff that doesn't need to be stoked. But then you think about also some of the things that we have come together on, that does bring us together. I think there's pretty much universal acceptance, and people are thrilled about composting. We all want to see our grounds improved, and really, I think, as much as we might see some differences in how we do this, we don't want to see maintenance go up, and beyond what is necessary. And I think so. What you're seeing is when you look at the candidates, it's not so much as like this one. It's not as black and white, but I think it is an issue of priorities, and what do we consider to be the priorities right now? And we can, because I consider how we do maintenance. I'll talk about priorities in another question.
I'm going to repeat something that I said on Thursday, so pardon me if you were here on Thursday, but for everyone else, I wanted to give some context to the question about all of us getting along. It's very hard for two people to live together. It's much harder for 2,000 plus to live together. I think some of this is a product of human nature. There will be difficult times, issues. There might be people who are feeling badly about things that have nothing to do with Morningside itself, and that gets brought into different contexts. I certainly think that we have many ways that we can improve how we relate to each other, the civility on our campus, at meetings, and I agree with everyone. I think that is a hard thing to defend, why we should not be polite. But again, the numbers that we have here, things will happen by human nature. I wanted to just bring up also sort of like a second cousin to this question, the whole notion of caucuses, because someone also on Thursday brought up the notion of the people on the board meeting before, having a prearranged meeting before a board meeting, and whether that was good or bad. And I think that the notion of caucuses caucus itself is a neutral term. It's the intent of the caucus. If the intent is to bring about greater knowledge, sharpen your skills for the meeting, that's fine. If the intent is to obstruct, well, I would rather run for Congress where I can do it more effectively. So I hope that the civility will be something that we all work on.
there were some real old and deep divisions that we had when we had the whole issue of changing from a limited equity co-op and going to market. Those were real divisions. But that is past history, it is behind us. But today, people do have a difference in the way they look at things. And there are people, like we have two main issues, and everybody has said, we need to protect our investments, which are substantial, and yet we want to consider the community and the people who are having a hard time making it with current maintenance costs. And those two things are real. And people have differences of opinions about where the emphasis should go, or where we should draw the line. And it's a fine line. Unfortunately, the differences of opinions become entrenched as factions, and that doesn't have to be the case. You can have differences of opinion, you can lean more towards one direction than another, and still respect the other for what they think. So I think we can get there, but it's a hard road to hoe.
I believe that this community has had discussion and argument just about everything over the years. It's going way back to Reconstitution, maybe before Reconstitution. But I do believe that we can agree to disagree and work together, keeping in mind that this is our home, and it's up to all of us to get together and work on bettering it for all of us.
I'll repeat, at the risk of boring those who were here Thursday night, something I said then, which is that I consider myself a person to whom a stranger is simply a friend I haven't met yet. I've been surprised at some cold shoulders, at some ignoring that I've felt from some folks here, but I will pledge to be as open as I possibly can and to reach out to everybody in the community, try to listen to them, try to consider their needs in my role as a member of the board of directors.
Yeah, I think I will say something similar to what I said on Thursday, but I think because I was on the board for 4 terms, I always say that the first 2 terms, that's the first 6 years I was on the board, I think the board was pretty well organized, and then we respect each other, even though we can have different opinions on certain issues, and then we discuss, and then we talk about it. Like I said, I always read the materials beforehand. I can reach a certain decision of my own, but when I went to the board meetings, I can hear other people's points. That might change my decision. So I think if all the board members to have the same attitude, to try to listen to other opinions besides their own, then we can really make decisions for the entire the corporation. I mean, for all of the shareholders of this corporation, and then also not only on the board, also outside of the board. We can talk to all different kinds of shareholders, even though our opinions might be different on certain issues or different issues, but we can still act civilly. And then the one thing I really oppose is we don't attack people. That's what I said. I was a victim of that a few years ago. So, thank you.
Well, as I've said before, I'm a relatively new shareholder. I have assiduously avoided the political life at Morningside Gardens because it seemed to me that it was just the ball bouncing back and forth across the tennis net. it was this side said this, and then this side said that, and then this side said this. And frankly, I don't think that's going to change without a real reboot in the community. I mean what I said when I talked about a reboot. And in my opening statement, I talked about three things. Real compromise, which I don't have to explain what that is. Compromise is compromise. And one example of that is, it seems to me that there are these great Stalinist purges whenever one side wins over the other, and all the committees are cleaned out, right? All the people who've been working on something, and it happens both sides do it. So compromise would be about keeping people in place that have some sort of knowledge about what's going on. Intent listening is something I do for a living, right? I listen to people all the time that I don't agree with, and sometimes I actually learn something from those people. It's a skill that you develop, and it takes a great deal of humility to actually listen to somebody that you're pissed off at. So that's a skill. And the last thing is a willingness to change your mind, which seems to me essential. And it's something, and I'm criticizing the community I'm a part of and I love, and I've actually been part of an unwillingness to change my mind. It's never helpful. It's never helpful. So whoever wins this election, I hope we will see those three things at work so that next year's election doesn't need to be on a slate. People could actually come and sit at this table and tell you what they think about the future, not, for God's sake, what they think about the past and all the things that have happened in the past.
Hi, okay, thank you for the question. I'm going to come at it from a different angle, because I heard in that question also something about history versus, change. And so Morningside Gardens has a very special history in a lot of different ways. And we have a lot of traditions that are worth maintaining. Yes, my colleagues have outlined some traditions of strife that are not worth maintaining. But we have a lot of very special things here that go on, that don't go on in any other co-op. And it's worth valuing those, and it's worth maintaining those. At the same time, change is part of life. There is the saying, change is the only constant. And I know that's been hard for our community at times to embrace certain kinds of big changes. But, we do need to have a balance between embracing changes and maintaining our history and doing both without tearing ourselves apart and without these big divisions. There came a time when the sewing club was no longer active, when the photography club was no longer active, when the computer lab was no longer useful. I mean, change is just a part of things. We repurposed the trunk room to be another room at the gym. So I think we need, as a community, to roll with these changes, and but yet value the good parts of our history, and through all of that, try to do it in a very cordial way. Thank you.
Okay, ticket number 157. Number 163.
My name is Jessie Barroso, and I reside in Building 6. My question is for Tova, and if I get an opportunity to come second, then I'll ask the whole board the question. Tova, after being board president twice, you became president of MGCA, a shareholders organization that you ran with an iron fist. And I must say that your divisiveness caused a building 6, where shareholders were very well, excuse me, may I ask? So I'd like to know, excuse me.
She's gonna get some questions.
So I have to get to it. So I like, excuse me, ma'am, be polite. This is my second meeting, and and I want to ask Tova a question. So your divisiveness was Building 6 not to have representation now. And I'd like to know, if you are elected, what will you do to bring harmony within Morningside? Thank you.
MGCA is not on the agenda here. We are talking now about the election for the board. If elected to the board, I will work with the board. I worked with the board before, I will work again. And all your accusations are totally out of place and a perfect demonstration of what we just discussed now about proper behavior and civility. Thank you.
Ticket number 152. Number 167.
Good afternoon, everyone. Marjay Tashina, Building 318C, shareholder and candidate for the Elections Committee. This should be a pretty positive question. Just want to this is to the forum. A general question about the Dwayne Reed situation. Was the $200,000 that we mentioned lost revenue? And have we considered perhaps, rather than putting in a big box store, perhaps subdividing it, that would at least generate income if we had one or two smaller parts?
Yeah, it's tough when any of our tenants chooses not to renew their lease or runs into financial problems where they can't. Ideally, we would have had realtors on that really early in the game to have something lined up for that space once it was vacated. I think it's mostly in. Anyway, I think all options are being considered in terms of dividing the space or renting it as a big space. I don't think there's any aim to limit it. I'm sure that all options are being considered. The thing is, there is a cost. If you're going to divide the space, there is a capital cost to us, so that has to be factored in. If we're going to fix it up in a different way before renting it out. So everything just has to be factored in.
Well, that would not go to the future tenant. They said they could only take part of the space. They wouldn't assume the cost.
No, if we are renting out only part of the space, it would be our cost to change that space into a divided space first. It's a different story if they're taking the whole space, then they would pay for whatever transformation they do to that space. But I think we need to have very aggressive and very competent brokers showing that space, and brokers who are very connected in this community. I know when we had the Blockbuster space open up, it was tough then too, and I actually went around to some local merchants and actually brought in one bid myself, but which helped. It wasn't the winning bid, but I think it helped. It helped have some competition. So, and the thing is, until we have a tenant in there, though, we shouldn't be budgeting as if we're going to be receiving income from that space, and that was a mistake made in the past.
The other sitting board members will, I hope, back me up on this. There's activity going on. I can't be more specific about it because it's happening in closed session meetings of the board. The board, as far as I can tell, is in agreement about the necessity to get this space rented. What we have dealt with, and me for only 6 months, because I've only been appointed for 6 months, is the notion that that's a very difficult strip of commercial space to rent. there are other vacancies further south in the next block. There's a concern about foot traffic and other things. So I think, even though I haven't always been in agreement with my colleagues on the board about how we go about it, I think there is general agreement and very strong agreement that the space be aggressively marketed and rented to a solid tenant, because it does represent a decrease in what the rest of us have to pay in maintenance when the renters are paying.
Yeah, just since I'm not on the board, so and then they're discussing this like in the closed session. But I think the board will like has been discussing all different options to do it. Yeah.
The sitting board members know obviously more than the rest of us. It is my understanding that a subdivision of the space is being considered. And yes, it would be a capital cost to us. I was at one point a real estate broker and dealt with some commercial spaces. And an incoming tenant would not pay for the subdivision into separate demised spaces. We would have to build the walls and provide whatever separation was necessary for electrical work, plumbing, and so forth. So there would be some expense. Presumably, getting some rent in there would be a wonderful thing. A solid tenant would be great. Let's get some money.
I was at the board when we actually recruited Dwayne Reed. And I can tell you that that was also a long process. We are not in a good position, not in a good location for commercial outfits. We are a bit too much to the north of Columbia University, and we are to the south of 125th Street. I don't know if you realize it, before Dwayne Reed came, there were actually 4 stores in there.
Yeah, long time residents.
Okay.
I have a feeling, that's why.
Yeah, there were 4 sort of mom and pop stores. At the time, we tried to look at every option. When we came along, and we had to relocate the store to get there. I have no doubt in my mind that the board is just as anxious to get it rented as any one of us sitting here, because it will help our financials. And I'm hoping it will work, but you know, like Seth Melly is out of business too. So this is let's hope for the best.
I don't want to waste your time. Everything that's been said, I think everything that could be said has been said.
Well, I'm not on the board, and maybe I have something that hasn't been said. Yes, the difficulty in renting is also compounded, as we said. There are 3 other storefronts that are for rent on the west side of Amsterdam, and on the east side of Amsterdam, don't forget that Columbia University School of Social Work street level is vacant, and that's a huge thing. Psychologically, people see that on both sides of the street and wonder, do they want to venture in and open up something new? We need to do some serious analysis about whether this is a trend, whether it's the specific type of restaurant or other operation that we're trying to open that makes sense. We need to possibly have conversations with some of the other realtors just to see if there are common reasons, because just to fill this, to have it vacant 2 years from now or 3 years from now doesn't make sense. We want to make sure that we have someone that fills a need for the community. We have some very unfortunate architectural situations with some of the vacant areas. Kitchenette is surviving with the horseshoe construction going in one end and wrapping around. But some of the others that have that type of construction are very difficult to consider building a new business. And says the deed went out because they think we probably oversaturated the neighborhood with yet another restaurant. So we need to make sure that we understand why certain things aren't working and what would work best in this neighborhood.
So just question for the committee, is there gonna be any more questions? Because I would yield my time if we got another question. I mean, I know there are, but I don't know if we're at time, you know.
We have one more question, or do we want to stop? I'm sorry, ask the question. Candidates, do you want another question? How many of you want another question?
Excuse me, it's not fair of us to go sitting here.
Show of hands if you want to do that.
We're asking the question.
Show of hands if you want.
I think if we were allowed to go over a few minutes the other day, we can do it again today.
I'm gonna yield it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, ticket number 162.
My name's Shelley Miller, I live in Building 2. My question is to the 7 people who are either currently on the board or who have been on the board. And it's one of those job interview questions. When you were sitting on the board, or since you're sitting on the board now, what mistake or error did you make? And let's not go to the chimney, okay? Okay, I've sort of lost my train of thought. What mistake or error do you think you made in retrospect? Obviously, I mean, all of you serve, anybody who served on the board has done so at incredible cost to yourself personally and with a lot of commitment. So it's not a criticism, but it's more that job interview question about what would you do differently? How do you see it? How does it affect how you're going forward in the board?
Instead of 7. You mean anyone who's been on the board or is on the board?
Yes.
So I can go first. So at one of the meetings, there was an issue that I didn't know enough about, and it had to do with the Family Activities Committee and some of the play activity that was happening in the space between building 1 and 2. And it was something that now, that looking back, I wish I had learned more about, so I knew more about the issue before I voted. So in the first meeting, I abstained my vote, and so I actually did know enough to make a decision. And I felt like that was something that was lacking on my part, that I should have taken a stand, I should have researched it more, and should have really had an opinion. And so that was my mistake in between that and the next meeting. I made sure that I learned the difference between a 13-inch and a 15-inch wheel or something like that. That if you don't have children, you have that handicap. And so that was something that I felt that it was an issue that was polarizing the community. It was something that I felt like I needed to be a better representative, and I didn't do a good enough job. And so I researched that. I'm sorry, but I have to leave. I have a train to catch.
Okay, well, I mentioned the chimney. I think that how we consider that it should have been done differently. It should have been done better. But I think there's something else though, that one of the lessons I learned. I think that it meant, reaching out and having more conversations with those I disagree with, or where there's differences of opinion. We did caucus, and I think that we took on some issues and we took them on hard, and the opposition was hardened also. And I think that there was I think that we did what we could to try to convince folks of the rightness of the position, and that had its usefulness. But I do think that doing more to kind of break down those lines and and at least come to some common understanding, some kind of common human understanding about what our differences were, so we could agree more, so we could disagree more agreeably. I brought up at the last meeting that Doug Simmons, when he was in the last year, hosted a dinner. He and his wife hosted a dinner that brought all of us together with our spouses, and I think it didn't solve the problem. I mean, I think we have some kind of, there are some things that are that the leadership of the board could do a lot better on in terms of kind of listening to others and kind of holding his tongue sometimes. But I do think that it did a lot to, I think, break down some of the typical barriers that we've had over time.
I think my biggest mistake going into my first term on the board was to naively think that the time and effort components of being a board member meant attending a meeting once a month. What could possibly happen in between one meeting and another? And I soon found out there were things like emergency meetings, special meetings, subcommittees, running into people, walking about the gardens. I think the whole notion of effort and that this is a 24/7 job became apparent over the first couple of weeks. And had I done my homework a little bit better, I think I would have had that a little bit down pat earlier. And I think that for anyone considering going to the whole effort of running for the board, it's important to speak to board members from an array of different opinions, because what they all probably will have in common is an agreement that it is a very difficult, rewarding, frustrating, and wonderful job all rolled into one. And it's best to do your homework early, and I wish I had done more of my homework earlier.
My one regret is that we were unable to solve the issue of the garbage and the rats. We were trying very hard, but it did not come off the way we wanted it. And maybe today, let's put it that way, we did not have the option of putting this big container at the time. The city insisted on bringing big compactors. And unfortunately, we were unable to come to some kind of arrangement to solve this issue.
I forgot. I think going forward, I would like to have, like just now we mentioned that as a board, we should all work together. Especially now, I mentioned earlier, like first 2 terms, I feel like all the board members work together pretty well. We discuss, and then we don't have like infighting for this past 2 or 3 years seems better. But during the 2008 or whatever to 2010 was like a mess on the board. So I think right now we should look forward and then to all the board members to work together, since now communication is much easier. Like through emails, we can discuss a lot of issues before the meeting, and then we should reach out to all board members, not just the board members we have the similar ideas for. And then also, I also think as board members, we don't just rely on the board materials. I think there's one thing I want to improve is to get shareholders' ideas or concerns to the board, because I think the board still lacks of that communication with the shareholders. Like last time I mentioned that I'll push for quarterly town hall meetings with shareholders, where shareholders can talk, can ask questions. So that way, I think will be much better for the entire community.
Well, I've been on the board for 6 months, and for about the first 3.5 months, I was pretty blindsided by the intensity of the work. So if I'm gonna be honest, to answer your question, I really can't think of anything because I'm just now really fully up to speed with what's going on. But as far as my mistakes in leadership around here, is I would just reiterate what I said before, is that too early on, I got sucked into some old arguments that predated me. And I regret that. I do not think it was helpful, and I would not carry that. I haven't carried it into these 6 months on the board. I made a point of getting to know the other caucus and talking to them about what they thought about the issues, and I would carry that forward. Because it was a mistake to not have that kind of open mind years ago when I first moved here.
Okay, thank you for the question, and thank you to everybody for staying late, for still paying attention to us. I care a lot about this community, very deeply about this community, and about the greater neighborhood, and I've done volunteer service in the greater neighborhood area too. And I also am someone who really likes to have procedure followed and fairness. And what I would do, my mistake was to be too emotional. And in my future board service, I would approach things more professionally, and I would just have a greater level of acceptance that there is going to be some degree of nuttiness here. And I guess I would just roll with that a little more. And you know, because as much as I want to serve this community, you know, I also, you know, I have to remain sane. So that would be my approach. A little more professionalism, a little less emotional. Thank you.
Are you interested in another question?